Guys, before we start today's show, I just want to remind you, if everyone can please subscribe to the show on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, like the show, rate it, review it, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review. It would really go a long way to help me and Bilal and this show's success. We want to build this together and we want to continue to build it with you. So please, we have some incredible guests, incredible episodes coming up. So before we get into this episode today, I just want to remind you the best way to support the show is to like and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. It is a great help. And also share it with a friend. If you know a Jets fan, friend of yours that would be interested in the show, share it with them. Thank you. Coming up on In-Flight Snack, we have it, a Victory Monday. That's right. What's up? We finally win a game. The Jets win a game. They're in the win column. It's the first Victory Monday of the season. We broke it all down. They were led by Bryce Hall, Breece the Beast. They were led by the defensive line with Bryce Huff and all those guys. They were led, obviously, by Quincy Williams. A fantastic episode celebrating a big Jets win. All that and a whole lot more coming up right after this on In-Flight Snack. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info, with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way through college football playoff and the Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. And remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts.
Let's go empty. Shotgun Fitzpatrick. Underneath. Powell. Catching current. Powell stays on his feet. He's gone. Touchdown. Jets. Powell.
For a touchdown score for the game, I'm going to go with Bryce Hall. I think Bryce Hall is going to score in this game.
So I'm going to get a little bolder. I think Bryce Hall comes in, rushes for over 100 yards, and 2 total touchdowns.
Jet sweep motion for Gibson. Hand off Bryce Hall, right up the middle, bust free to the 35-40. He's loose at the 50, right sideline 40. Bryce Hall at the 20, 10, 5, house call. That's a Jet touchdown.
Yards to make it a 60-yard attempt. Wilson lost the football. Rolling towards the sideline. Picked up by the Jets. It's Hall. And he goes.
Let's make sure we play like the New York Jets. Let's go to eat a damn snack.
Welcome back to In-Flight Snack, a New York Jets podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. That's Bilal Powell. I'm Rami, Lavi, and we finally have it, Bilal, our first Victory Monday of the season. For the Jets, it's their first Victory Monday because their first win came on a Monday night, so that was on a Tuesday. For us as a podcast, we didn't host a podcast together the next day. So as a podcast, this is our first Victory Monday. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't great. They made a lot of mistakes. It looked like at the end they might blow it, but they pulled it out in the end. They get the win. That's all that matters. That's all that matters in this league, whatever you want to call it, whether it's the Nate Hackett revenge game, whether it's the Quincy Williams NFL realizing he's great game. I told you that last week, by the way. Whether it's the Bryce Hall return game, whatever you want to call it, it happened yesterday for the Jets. Finally in a win column, and we're going to break it all down. Bilal, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. I'm doing well, and I'm happy this is Victory Monday. Like you said, it wasn't a nice, a good looking game, but it was a win. And I think that you could look at that game easily and say it was a 3-phase win. It was, again, all 3 phases playing together. Oh my goodness, it was exciting to watch. Obviously, you have to continue to clean up the mishaps, but we went into Denver. We won. I get it. They're not a good football team, but we went in and got a good win, a good team win, I should say.
Yeah, they're poorly coached too. I might as well throw that out there. But here's the thing. At 13-8, I'm just thinking, oh my God, I can't believe we're going to have to do this on the podcast, or we're going to have to bury the season. It's 13-8 at half, and I'm just like, I'm not ready to bury the season. And the game turned around because Bryce Hall turned the game around on one play. They get the ball right after the defense makes a great stand, a 3-and-out to start the second half. And Bryce Hall, they hand it off to him on the very first play, and he goes, 70-something yards for a touchdown, 72 yards for a touchdown. It changed the game. Not only did it give the Jets the lead in that moment, but it felt like it changed everything in that game.
Exactly. And I've been waiting for them to take the leash off of that man. He's a straight dog. Breece Hall is exciting to watch. And I knew if he had the opportunities in this league, he can show that he is a top 5 running back in this league. This is what we needed to see from Breece Hall. He's healthy. Fans, he's healthy. Jets, he's healthy. Continue to use him how you want now. But I would say this, and Nathaniel Hackett, I have to take my hat off to that guy. It seems like he's just had an idea how he really wanted to use Zach Wilson, and we're starting to see that in this offense now. Every play I saw some kind of shift, some kind of motion, and I think that's to help Zach identify zone man just for his sake. Now, if it's a zone, Zach knows where to go with the ball. If he see a guy following the motion guy, he understands it's man to man. He knows where to go with the ball. So I think that's great game plan by Nathaniel Hackett, understanding that that's a way that he can help Zach Wilson identify defense, identify zone man, and be able to get the ball out of his hands quickly.
You're seeing it both ways. They said on the broadcast, they said that Zach Wilson said this is the first time that he felt like a coach trusts him with Nathaniel Hackett. But it goes both ways. You clearly see that Nathaniel Hackett, this is the first time that Zach Wilson's actually taking to something that a coach is telling him, that you're seeing something that's being taught to him on the field. Like you said, if it's a zone, here's how you identify this. There were times that he's making changes at the line of scrimmage, that he's making different reads, and he's making things happen on his own. That's something that is the reason they broke a 3-game losing streak. It's the reason they snapped it, because they have a guy who all we wanted him to be was what you expect from a backup quarterback to be, which is just a game manager. 2 weeks ago, he wasn't ready to be that. And somehow today he is. And you got to credit Nathaniel Hackett, and you got to credit Zach for that.
You do. And Zach is looking a lot comfortable, more comfortable than he did in the previous weeks. You can see how he is just allowing the game to slow down. He's not out there playing in a hurry anymore. He's not panicking in the pocket. He's going through his progressions. He's taking what the defense is giving him. You saw the checkdowns that he was giving down to his running backs. You saw him in the red zone after that turnover that Irvin Charles committed on the punt team. I would like to see them score in that opportunity, being so low in the red zone. We'll talk about it. But you see the very next play where he moved the middle linebacker with his eyes and hit Alan Lazard on a slant. Those are the things that you want to see from your quarterback as an offensive coordinator, because in this league, you can't get away with the things you used to be able to get away with in college. Iron, last week we saw him eye down his reads. Previous weeks, eyeing down his reads. You can't do that. That is how you create turnovers. So for him to go in, moving the middle linebacker with his eyes to create more space for Alan Lazard on that slant is letting me know that Zach Wilson is getting better.
You're right. He is. It's a different player than what we've seen. And when you watched him a couple weeks ago, did you believe that this was the guy he was capable of being at any point? Because it felt like he was nowhere close to this.
I mean, you saw glimpses in previous years. You saw the glimpse, but the thing about it is being consistent. You have to be a consistent player in this league, especially at the quarterback position. You can't be up and down and inconsistent week in and week out. If Zach Wilson continues to show that he's this consistent, he can help the New York Jets win a lot of games. You're seeing the way the games are running out now. Baltimore took a loss yesterday. It's like we're in the middle of this pack if we continue to stack these plays. And now that Bryce Hall is off the leash, it's going to open up so many different opportunities for those offensive guys. Garrett Wilson, Lazar Allen. You see Conklin coming alive. The tight ends are coming alive. Like, it's going to create so much more for your offensive players because of Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall in the run game is the most manipulating thing you can do to a defense is run the football. It opens up so many other opportunities.
It does, and you saw it on the play action pass where that how it opened up that play action pass to where he ultimately gets it to Garrett Wilson, right? Where he rolls out to the right and everyone's going one way and then he's able to throw it back the other way to get Garrett Wilson. You're right. It opened everything up for this Jets team in this game. It was incredible to watch. And it's everything we talked about. They're right there. They're middle of the pack. They snap a 3-game losing streak. You're 2-3. The Bills lose. The Ravens lose. And everything we talked about with Bryce Hall coming into the game, what I said, which was we want to see him finish those runs. How about him finishing on that 70-something yard touchdown that we talked about? He finishes the run. He beats the safety, right? When he gets to that third level and he's one-on-one with the safety, he just outruns him. That was the Bryce Hall we saw last year. We hadn't seen that yet this year. And then what you talked, him being a workhorse. He got the ball. He touched it 25 times in this game and still could touch it more, but 25 times in this game, 25 touches, 194 total yards, a touchdown to go with it, and that long touchdown to start the second half, finishing the play. Everything that he did, they fed him the ball. He finished the game. He started the game, and he was the key to the offense in the game. And it allowed Zach Wilson to not have everything be on his shoulders. We talked about this. Zach Wilson didn't have a great game by any stretches. Zach Wilson made mistakes. Zach Wilson missed a couple of throws. He wasn't perfect. He was a game manager. He was everything you would want him to be because you were leaning on Bryce Hall and you're leaning on that defense.
Yeah, exactly. And being able to run the football is going to complement this defense. It's going to allow those guys to take a break on the sideline. You know, people don't understand when the defense is on the sideline, they're making their adjustments. So if the offense is going 3 and out, they don't even have time to go through their adjustments, not only catch their breath, but go through their adjustments. So if the offense is able to run the ball, you're talking about time of possession, and this guy's explosive. You're talking about first downs. It's just going to complement not only the defense, Zach Wilson. Now Zach Wilson doesn't have this pressure on him. Now, for me, there was a drive where there were 9 straight runs. Rami, that's hard to do. There were 9 runs in a drive.
I wrote that down also. Yep.
Like that to me is that's sucking the life out of a defense when you're running the ball 9 times. That's you lining up 9 times saying we're running the ball. You have to stop it. It's the most manipulating thing you can do. Not only that, defenses get tired. That's why the runs come later in the game. We always talk about, as a running back group, big runs not coming in the first half, the first quarter. It's going to come later in the games. And you saw the beginning of that second half, that explosive runs, great adjustment by Nathaniel Hackett. They made an adjustment, and you could just see that the Denver Broncos looked like they had a couple guys out of the gap responsibilities, because I haven't seen a hole that big in so long. Like, he ran through it, no one touched him. So to me, that's
credit Max Mitchell and Joe Tippmann on the play as well.
Yeah, obviously you want to see that. You want to see you guys getting going downfield, your O lineman getting downfield, going to the next level. That's how you create runs in this league. But also, like I said, Bryce Hall is back. That one-on-one, the big time running backs get paid to beat one-on-one. And when that safety came down, I don't think people realize how fast Bryce Hall is. You don't know how fast he is until you're chasing him. And you saw that one move that he made and just dominated the angle that safety had, and he went for 70-some yards.
I think on the broadcast they called him a Corvette, or they called him some sports car because he's smooth.
Just too smooth.
You can't tell when you're watching it on TV. You don't realize how fast it is, but he beats everyone. So he's obviously going really, really fast, but it just looks so smooth. And the other thing, like you mentioned, it makes everything easier for everyone else. I mean, they fed the ball. Matt Ryan was dying for them to throw play action in there as they just keep handing it off and handing it off and handing it off. And maybe once they got into the red zone, they should have thrown a couple, because they had a couple runs in a row that stalled at the end of that drive. And a lot of drives did stall in the red zone, and we'll get to that in a second. But it opens the game up for Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, I mentioned the stats to you earlier. On first down, Zach Wilson on 13 attempts was 8 for 10 for 78 yards. He scrambled twice for 17 yards and was sacked for a total loss of only 2 yards. That's 93 yards on 13 dropbacks. Now, they didn't have enough first downs in the game, and we'll get to some of the mistakes they made in this game a little bit later, because there certainly were plenty of them. But the game is so much easier for Zach Wilson because of Bryce Hall, because of Nathaniel Hackett and everything they're doing on this offense. And it finally feels like, you talked about this so much, Aaron Rodgers, the offense was set up for him. The offense was created around him. And finally, it feels like there's a game plan and there's something in place that fits Zach Wilson, that fits this team. And that includes Bryce Hall being fully healthy. Bryce Hall had 8 yards per carry on 22 rushes in this game. That's how effective he was in this game. And of course, the long run spikes those numbers up, but that's how effective he was. And it feels like this offense is finally where it needs to be.
It is. It is. And listen, if you continue to play like that, right, as an offense with the defense that we have, also, I don't think we'll talk about it now. Having Bryce Hall come in and doing a phenomenal job.
Yep.
You would think that Denver would have game planned around him to attack him, being a guy that third string. Like you would think that they would have had a better game plan to attack him. And you saw the New York Jets playing man to man in the game, so you would think that they had something to go and defeat that purpose. But like I said, man, it's just like they're playing complete football. They're playing total team football right now. Special teams, offense, defense, and that's what you want to see as an organization, as a fan base. That's just complete football.
You talk about that you talked about the adjustments that they made at halftime. One of the adjustments that they made was on the defensive side. Jeff Ulbrich, you talk about playing man to man. They were getting crushed. Their backs were turned on Russell Wilson, and they were getting crushed on the QB scrambles. It's what killed them last week against Patrick Mahomes was those quarterback scrambles. And it's like, oh my God, here we go again in the first half. Russell Wilson's running all over the place, and he looks like Seattle Russell Wilson all of a sudden. And I think something interesting that happened was all of a sudden they made an adjustment and they bring down Tony Adams as a spy. And it's like, okay, now we're still going to play man to man. We still know we can get home with the rush, and we still know we can cover on the back end, even with Bryce Hall, which credit to him that he's able to cover he's coming in for a guy like DJ Reed, who's one of the best corners in the league, and he's able to cover on the back end. And now we're going to stop you. Saw on that big third down, they end up stopping Russell Wilson where he's running on that first drive, right? That would have been an easy pick up the first down, scramble 15 yards. Instead, they stop him. But it all started on the defensive side with Quincy Williams. I mean, we've gone far enough without talking about him. I mentioned it after last week. I said he was the best player on the field for the Jets. He continues to be the best defender on the field for the Jets. 9 tackles, 5 solo tackles, 2 sacks. Of course, the fumble, both sacks come on that last drive. That was the game-ending drive, essentially, right? It's the second to last drive for the Broncos, where the last drive was just, a couple of Hail Marys or whatever. But that's the end of the game, essentially. He ended the game. The first time he forced a 3rd and 15. The Jets give up another long third down, which we'll get to. Just continue. When you talk about mistakes, you can't forget about that. They give up another long 3rd down conversion. They blitzed twice. And I mentioned this because Joe Beningo was on this podcast yelling about they have to blitz. At the end of the game, they're like, hey, we're sending an extra rusher at Russell Wilson, and we're ending this game here. And both times it was Quincy Williams. He gets the sack the first time. They give up the first down, and he doesn't give up. He's like, I'm coming right back at you, strips the ball, and Bryce Hall takes it to the house. What a game for Quincy Williams. And I feel like the rest of the league is finally taking notice, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They are. I mean, the defense, they're playing now to where no matter who you put in there, you just have to fit into the defensive scheme. That's just how good the defense is. Would I like to see them start faster? Absolutely. But the game is broken up into 4 phases, man. It's you coming out in your game plan. The second phase is filling out your opponent. When you get in there, maybe they're playing a little different. As a linebacker, they're filling out the running back, and the running back's filling out the linebackers. Is he falling in his back gap, or is he overplaying the gap? And then the third phase is what the Jets did yesterday, is making your adjustments. You make your adjustments. And then in the 4th phase of this game, everyone in the stadium knows what you're doing. Everyone in the stadium, is not a surprise anymore. And then that's just when your ball players go make big time plays. Now you're looking at the defense. If you can just pick up this red zone defense from the New York Jets and put that out past the 50-yard line, you're talking about a historical defense. Now they struggle outside the 50, but they do a great job when teams get into the red zone. But let's talk about self-inflicted things that's happening with these guys. You're talking about a lot of missed tackles. You're talking about a lot of missed tackles from a very good defense. If they tackle the ball better, I think the Denver Broncos score less points. in this game because you're talking about one tackle that created an explosive play for the Denver Broncos. So I think they need to do a better job of tackling the ball. Jeff Ulbrich did a great job of adjusting. You saw the time that they caught us in man-to-man and the running back slipped out into a screen. Well, that third time that they tried to do it, the linebackers was right there. All right. And then the third time that Russell Wilson tried to scramble, the safety was right there. So they did a good job of adjusting. That's what you want to see as a player. You want to see your coaches adjusting to what the team is giving us because, you can go into a game plan thinking that they're going to do something, come out, and if you don't adjust, you're going to get creamed. So Jeff Ulbrich did a good job of adjusting at halftime, putting his players in the best positions to make the plays. And then New York Jets defense, they made the plays.
Yeah, and like you said, I wish they would start faster. But maybe you could tell me this. You talk about the mistakes, and it's tough to focus on the mistakes after a game like that because they needed a win so badly, and they did come through. They got the win. Is it easier to correct the mistakes after a win when, afterwards you're looking at it and you're saying, wow, even with all these things, we still won the game. We had 9 penalties for 70 something yards. We had the 2 crucial turnovers that you can't have happen in these spots. We couldn't convert a single time in the red zone. We're 0 for 5 in the red zone. All these things that were terrible on Sunday, but you win. Is it easier to look at it and say, hey, we won, but we can be better. Let's focus up on what we can improve at. Or does some of this stuff get kind of masked by the win?
No, honestly, winning makes it a lot easier to come into the building. Trust me. Winning just makes everything a lot easier. Obviously, they have some mishaps that they have to correct because, later in the season, you cannot have those same things. Brent Boyer, who was my old special team coach, still on the coaching staff, one of his favorite things he says is it's not going to catch up until it catches up. So, those are the things you need to continue to, clean up and winning, coming off of a road win. And let's be honest, going out to Denver, that's a 3-day trip in itself. So just coming off of a road win in Denver, it makes it a lot easier. And when you're coming back in and getting corrected, looking at film, and you're telling yourself like, wow, we did this, we accomplished this with all of these mistakes. How good can we be if we limit those mistakes, if we limit those errors, if we limit the mental errors, if we tackle the football, how good can we possibly be? And that gives you a lot of room for potential later on in the season.
Yeah, and they don't go back on the road for over a month now because they come home, have a home game, then the bye, and then the Giants game is officially a road game, but that's at their home stadium, and then another home game before they go on the road. So this is a long stretch where they're going to be sitting in MetLife Stadium, and they have a lot of time to look at this stuff. And I think something that happened last year was that stuff caught up to them. They were 7-4, but there were so many mistakes, and I talked about it all the time. I was like, there's this mistake and that mistake. I don't want to be that guy who's not enjoying these wins. Trust me, I'm happy. This is the best start we've had since you guys did it in 2015. But at some point, it's going to catch up to you, and it did catch up to them. This year, they have to know, Robert Saleh has to know that winning can mask it, but we have to get better with some of these things. And you're seeing it. Like, I thought Zach Wilson, let's use him as an example. I didn't think he was as good in this game as he was in the Kansas City game. I think that's not a crazy statement. He was a lot better in the Kansas City game. But the fact that he had a second consecutive game where he was doing the same things, where he wasn't making the mistakes, it just felt like he was playing quarterback as opposed to whatever the heck he was doing for the last few weeks of last season and the first couple of weeks of this season. It's a different player. It's like yesterday looked like a quarterback who had not a great game. In the past, he looked like a guy who was not an NFL quarterback. And so that alone, having back-to-back games like that, in and of itself is an improvement. Before you talk about anything else, that alone is an improvement. And so even with having a worse game than last week, you could see growth. Does that make sense that he grew from last week to this week, even though it was a worse performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, man, just looking at him and what he's doing with the football, he's checking it down. I mean, even on the third and longs, like he's just checking it down. He's not trying to do too much. He's taking what the defense is giving him. And at the end of the day, man, you get the player the ball, the skilled players the ball, and they have to just do what they have to do with the football. Zach Wilson, I think, is doing a lot better. Statistically, he didn't look better than he did versus Kansas City. And we know that Denver Broncos is not a Kansas City team. We get it. We understand it. But just to see those small things that go unseen, at how he's going through his progressions, he's taking what the defense is giving him. That's going to build confidence for Zach. And you got to take your hat off again to the offensive line for giving him the time. Giving this guy the time is showing fans in that Jets organization why Zach Wilson was picked at number 2. He was picked at number 2 because he's given the time now. You're starting to see the trust that he has. His eyes are no longer on the rush. It is downfield going through his progressions. And that's all you can ask for as a quarterback, to keep the pocket clean. I'm not saying that I'm not going to be hurried and there's going to be a perfect game, but you give me enough space to where I can go through my progressions as a quarterback and I can show you my talent.
Yeah, and he's not panicked in the pocket, right? Like what Tiki Barber talked about. He's shuffling his feet. He's not bailing out of there. He's hanging in there. He's trusting his offensive line. You talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When a guy's so worried about the rush, he's not thinking about anything else. He's panicked and trying to just avoid the rush. You saw it. What was it against the Patriots? He just sat down in the pocket. We're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing a guy shuffle his feet. You saw the offensive line held up on that big throw to Tyler Conklin. I think that was one of the throws that showed so much growth for Zach Wilson. Was the 3rd and 4. This is the drive, 4-minute offense. We need to end this game right now. Let's pick up a big 3rd down. And everyone knows you're throwing it and you're drop back and they spread out wide. I think they didn't even have anyone in the backfield. I think they spread out the whole offense and it's like, hey, make a throw, kid. And he drops back, goes through his progressions. Not there. Okay, shuffle my feet. I feel the rush coming a little bit from here. Shuffle my feet to the other side. Okay, look back to the right. Hey, there's Conklin. Let's get him. By the way, Tyler Conklin, he had 2 routes and that one in a route previously. He is such a good route runner for a tight end. Like I was watching those feet. I'm like, that guy for a tight end, that is a big man. And he moves like that. That was pretty good. But Zach Wilson, that's the improvement. But then you see the lack of awareness at the end of the half. Like that kills you when you watch stuff like that. When you watch a kid who's just, you have to know the time. You have to have more urgency than that. Everyone has to have more urgency. Get up and spike the ball. You lost 3 points. That could have cost you the game. The fact that you didn't get 3 points there, that could have ended up losing them the game. Luckily, it didn't. You have to clean that up. Again, take a win and grow from it. The interception. At that point in the game, you're in field goal range now. All you have to do is kick a field goal, right? You have to know that at that point in the game, also at the end of the game, throw a ball that's a risk-free ball. Throw it to the outside shoulder like you did so well last week so many times, right? Throw it to the back shoulder. If Garrett Wilson makes a play on it, fantastic. If he doesn't, it falls harmlessly and that's it. But you threw it in a spot where Surtain can make the interception, and that's exactly what happened. So there's definitely things you want to see improvements on. But this kid is clearly, just like we said, a different quarterback than he was 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't solely blame the awareness, the lack of awareness on Zach Wilson. I think that was an overall offensive lack of awareness. That's coaching. That's getting a certain play call. Maybe
Yeah, true,
throwing
but
the
that's
ball
something.
away. It could be throwing the ball away, but there was no sense of urgency. You have to think about the referees spotting the ball. Like everything, like pretty much goes in place as a unit when it
But that's
comes to
something that
that
doesn't
lack of
happen if Aaron
awareness.
Rodgers is on the field.
Yeah,
Like,
well, maybe Aaron just throws the ball away and say, "Hey, field goal comes out." Maybe instead of throwing that ball and getting tackled in bounds,
yep.
but maybe he throw the ball away. But I think it was just a total lack of awareness as an offensive unit. I wouldn't put that solely on Zach Wilson. I mean, there's so many things that go into play.
Yeah. All right. There's a few more things we want to talk about. We'll give you our players of the game. We'll talk about all that coming up. Just quickly before we take a quick break, I just want to mention this. Quincy Williams is the first player in Jets history to record 9+ tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and a tackle for a loss, and 3 quarterback hits. He also had 3 quarterback hits in a single game. And it's Williams' second consecutive game with at least 9 sacks, at least 1 tackle for a loss, and at least 1 quarterback hit. This kid is playing at an all-pro level. It's unbelievable to see. How does that happen that a guy just, he comes out of nowhere where, he wasn't on any team, and then the Jets pretty much pick him up, give him a chance because Quinnen's on the team. Like maybe that's why he even got a chance in the first place. and then he turns into this all-pro caliber player who you can't watch a Jet game without being like, who's 56?
I mean, honestly, it's just falling into the right opportunity, and just being a coachable player, and being a guy that's just hungry, and being a guy that I think he's one of those silent leaders. Honestly, I think his leadership is overlooked by other players on the team, but I think he's one of those silent leaders that leads by example, by his play. You know what I mean? And as a coach, you don't want everyone to be a leader verbally. You want different leaders on your team, and that's some of those guys. They come in all shapes and sizes, man. And I think he's one of the leaders on this team by the way he played. When you turn on film and you say, "Hey, play like a Jet," Quincy Williams should be one of the top guys to say, "This is how you play like a New York Jet." I think on any organization, I think any team would love to have a guy like that on their team. Um, Obviously, he makes his plays when they're presentable. He's fitting into the scheme. He looks really good. He's fast. He can cover. I mean, the guy he's one of very few linebackers that is doing what he's doing right now.
Yeah, and you know what he reminds me of, and you were there for this, young Demario Davis when he was coming into his own, right? When he started becoming, when you realize, oh, this guy's going to be something special. Like he was a linebacker who was good for a couple years in the league for sure first, but then all of a sudden there was a couple years there where it's like, oh my God, this guy has gone from he's a good linebacker to an all-pro linebacker. And maybe just because they both wore 56, I don't know, but that's what he looks like out there, the way he's flying around on that field.
Yeah, and now he's what 13 years in and still at the top of his game in New
Yeah,
Orleans.
doing it in New Orleans. Yep.
But he was a smart guy, man. He reminded me he was a bigger version of Quincy.
Yeah.
He's a lot bigger than Quincy, but man, just the way they played, man, I think he could play all three linebacker position. He was just a smart guy, a leader. He was more verbal, I would think, than Quincy. But I don't play with Quincy, so I wouldn't know. But just from a social media standpoint, you saw a lot of Double D in the social media. But man, they both made plays, both were fast, and I think he's gonna have a long career.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we'll talk about all that. There's a couple other things we have to break down. We also have to give you an injury update. So all that, we'll tell you the player of the game, all that, and a whole lot more coming up after a quick break. Coming back, something you mentioned, and I didn't bring this up at the time, but you mentioned this in the first half of the episode. You talked about them being thin in the secondary, and you talked about the Broncos not making adjustments. I kind of mentioned them being one of the worst coach teams in the league. One of my favorite moments, and I think this was my favorite moment of the game. It wasn't the game defining by any stretch, but this was one of my favorite moments. Sauce Gardner goes out with an injury, and the Jets are down to practice squad corners. And Sean Payton, what'd you do? You decided to get cute and run a little end around trick play. And guess what? They fumbled and we recovered it. You loser. So that was my favorite part of the game because they were like, oh, like that was my first thought. You just have a practice squad corner come onto the field. Sauce Gardner's out. Bryce Hall's out there. Michael Carter's out there also, probably not even covering in the slot where he's best. And what you did was you decided to run a freaking trick play. That's the time. Like there was zero awareness. So I don't want to hear anyone talk about Sean Payton as a coach after that. I'm done with him as, oh, what a great coach Sean Payton is. Cool. Save it because that was hilarious, dude.
Yeah, obviously, man. I agree with you. You probably are thinking as a player, like, what are we doing right now? Just even with the field position that we have, why are we even going to a trick play when they have in a backup corner, a practice squad guy? Let's attack them. And let's be honest, the Denver Broncos were running the ball very well. So why
Yeah.
are we doing that? Go downhill. You know, it's comical, honestly, man. And to think that Sean Payton would call that type of play in that situation with that field position, with the Jets situation. With as soon as I saw number one walking out the field, I'm on the sideline drawing something up in the dirt, saying, "Hey, you just go long, go deep.
Yeah.
We're about to attack these guys in the passing game." But that was a bone that we were given by the New York Jets, honestly. And I'll take it.
get Cortland Sutton involved, get Jerry Jeudy involved. Now's the time to do it. And I think something we talked about the Jets getting so good in the red zone, but they let teams just walk into the red zone seemingly, and then all of a sudden they tighten up. I think a big part of that, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, I never played in the NFL, is because the Jets do give a lot of underneath plays to offenses. They let you go underneath and they're like, hey, we'll rally to the ball, we'll tackle you, right? So the short passes, the screen passes, the check downs, the run game, everything underneath. The Jets kind of are like, hey, don't beat us over the top. Then when the field condenses and you're in the red zone, there's no more underneath stuff, right? Because there is no over the top, right? You're only within 20 yards. So maybe that's why they get so much better in the red zone, but maybe it's also kind of why they struggle outside of the red zone. That's all Russell Wilson ever wants to do is throw that underneath stuff. And maybe that's why they weren't able to take advantage of the corners, because they never even tried to throw over the top.
No. And honestly, I don't think Russell Wilson looks comfortable in that offense. He doesn't look like the same Russell Wilson we all saw in Seattle.
Yes, but
You,
that drive that he had, that quick drive to score when they made it 23-20, all of a sudden that looked like Russ again, right?
it did,
Or
but it's not
24-21.
yeah, but it's still not a consistent Russell Wilson that we saw. I mean, it just seems like he's just not going through his progressions, and I think most of that has a lot to do with the scrambling that he was doing early on. Most quarterbacks that don't go through the progression or they're playing in a hurry, they rely on their legs. And then once the New York Jets found a way to make an adjustment to that, you saw the true struggle of Russell Wilson, and you saw that struggle. But like you said, man, I think I would take my linebackers to say, hey, let's not get beat over top. Let's drive to the football, right? But the New York Jets have been struggling in tackling. So you find yourself in a situation where they're converting on third downs. I think you're talking about the Denver Broncos being 40% on third downs,
Yep.
which will put you in the middle of the pack in the National Football League. And then the New York Jets at like 25%, which will put you at the bottom of the league.
And it was worse than that because not only were they 40%, but the Jets also gave up a couple of first downs on penalties. So it's 4 for 10 on plays that they actually converted without penalties. You attack a couple of penalties that converted third downs on top of that, they're even better. They're probably closer to 50 or 60%. So the Jets really did struggle, and that's a big thing. There were miscues in this game. The Jets struggled on third down. 3 for 12 on offense is not good enough. They picked up the biggest one. I talked about it with Zach Wilson throwing that ball to Conklin. That was one of the biggest ones. They picked that one up. They picked up a couple on the ground, I guess. But 3 for 12, you have to be better than that. It's just not good enough. And Zach Wilson talked about it before the game. He talked about it. He said, I don't want to pick up first downs on third down. I want to pick up first downs on first down and second down. Let's stay away from third down as much as possible, because those are the toughest downs. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what you're going to do. You're in a situation where you probably have to throw the ball, and it's tough to do that over and over again.
But third downs is part of the game. Yep. Third down is a situation that's part of the game. And I think, when you look at where we are at statistically, you have to make that adjustment as an offensive staff. What are we doing wrong? Well, the number one thing that we're doing wrong is self-inflicted things. The pre-snap penalties that's putting us behind the chain. We're not being third and manageable. We're in third and long. And as an offensive coordinator, you don't have too many things in your playbook that is for third and long, maybe third and manageable, but not third and long. So now you're just forcing to throw underneath routes, making a guy miss, and just extending plays. Like, to me, that has to be something that's talked about as a staff of, hey, we have to stop getting behind the chains, self-inflicted wounds. We're beating ourselves. Other teams are not beating us. If we find a way to stay in front of the chains, especially with the run game that we have, if you add the run game in, now we're saying we're staying in front of the chains. And then when we do get the third down, Zach Wilson, which is a part of the game, we're in third and manageable, where if they do decide to drop back, you're more capable of, now with your athletic ability, to extend a play and go and get and run for a first down on third and short and third and manageable.
So you don't like him saying, let's try not to get to third down?
No, I don't like it. It's situational football. I think when you look at the game, you break the game down in situations. You have to break the game down in situations: first down, second down, third downs, short yardage, goal line, red zone, backed up, 4-minute. All these things are situational football that are implemented in the playbook when you're doing installs during the preseason, when you're in OTAs. All these things in the playbook are for these situations. So when we get to that situation, right, We understand what we need to do. We understand it. We understand that Zach Wilson is part of the game. All right. I wish, in a perfect world, that we could get first downs on first or second down, but it's not. Third downs is part of the game. I think we have to get a lot better. The New York Jets have to get a lot better on third downs.
Yeah, maybe they could take a page out of their opponents' books, because it seems like every time the Jets are giving up these third and long. So whatever the opponents are doing, maybe they should watch some of that, because how many times are going to watch this team give up a 3rd and 15 plus?
Yeah, and you hate to see that. That's on a third and long, and you give up a first down. Is like, wow. And third and 15, the offensive unit, everybody's putting on their helmet, because we just know it's about to be fourth down. Even if they catch the ball underneath and tackle the ball. But when you see a 3rd and 15 converted as an offensive unit, it's like, ugh. It's like gut wrenching. It's like a dagger. It's a dagger. So I think we have to do a better job on third down on our defense.
Yeah. A couple other things we talked about. You talk about the offense. Over 5 in the red zone is unacceptable. I don't know what's happening when you get inside, and maybe there's less room to work. We talked about it working to the defense's benefit. What did you see when you were watching their red zone offense? Why do you think they struggle so much in the red zone as an offense?
I just think with Zach Wilson, things are happening faster. When you get in the red zone, things are happening faster. Free safeties aren't as deep. The reads are, you have to think quicker, right? And I think with the run game, you have to get vertical. In the run game, you're not looking to get 4 or 5, 8 yard. The run game in the red zone, the tighter you get, a positive run is a positive run. And I think when you get down in the tight red, I think you need to have crossing routes. You need to have some kind of movement, trying to have an unbalanced look and an attacking back, play action. You have to just get really creative and move in the pocket, because you can't sit back there and just think you can just sit there and throw in a zone. You have to do some kind of crossing routes to get opponents moving. You got to get them off of their spots. Some defenses, they go as far as dropping 8 in the red zone to where there's no holes that you can get to. So I think you just have to continue to just narrow down what we're good at and emphasize that in the red zone.
You talked about crossing routes, the rub route that the Denver Broncos ran, right? Got a guy wide open in the red zone, in the end zone. That was the touchdown that they scored, was a perfect job where you ran a rub route. 2 guys miscommunicate. One's supposed to pick up the other guy. They don't switch. And then all of a sudden you have an easy touchdown. So yeah, definitely would like to see something like that. And also that's part of it. How many times did it feel like they were 3rd and goal, but they were 8 yards out of the end zone? Get closer, get right there, where you can open up a full playbook, where you can run a bootleg, where you can run a play action, where the run becomes a threat in the red zone, right? Inside the 10-yard line, where now it's like, okay, it's 3rd and 8 from the 8-yard line. We have to go for the end zone here. Like, everyone knows what you're doing. It's a pass, and it's probably going to go into the end zone.
Yeah, and honestly, 3rd and goal from the 8 out, defenses are taught to put their heels on the goal line.
Yep.
They're not getting into any backpedal. So again, you're talking about self-inflicted wounds by the offense. You have a better chance when you're 3rd and 5 in, because these teams are taught, these defenses are taught. A good, well-coached defense is taught to put their heels on the goal line and tackle anything in front of you. And honestly, we just have to stay out of those bad situations where we're playing behind the chains.
Is there something about committing penalties when it's like the bigger plays? It feels like sometimes when the play is more meaningful, that's when a penalty gets committed. And the example I'll use is the 2-point attempt, right? They get the big 2-point stop, and that's when the penalty happens. I didn't think it was a great call. It was kind of weak, but the call was there. It was the right call. There definitely was a little bit of a tug. Wasn't a ton there, but you got to stay away from that. You got to be able to avoid that. Why does that seem to happen? And of course, then they come right down and they get the 2-point conversion.
It just seems to happen, honestly. I will take those penalties over pre-snap penalties. Pre-snap penalties are something that you can control as an offense or a defense. You sometimes can't control what really happens in the time of action. You can't. Are you able to go to the sideline and the coach is able to tell you about your technique and your fundamental, absolutely. But in the game, you don't know what a guy is doing, especially from a defensive standpoint. You're telling me that I have to guard this guy and I have to almost let him dictate what he does. So there's going to be some kind of contact there to slow this guy down because he get paid just like I get paid to stop him. So those type of penalties, honestly, is a technique, a fundamental thing that can be coached and taught. But when you talk about pre-snap, that is something that is 100% our control. That is something that we don't even have to worry about putting in the hands of the referee in giving anything questionable, because we're always taught to play football in a way that we do not put it in the ref's hands. So those pre-snap penalties, I think, need to be eliminated for the New York Jets.
I saw Mekhi Becton was posting about his false start. He didn't like the call. He thought he was moving at the exact same time. He was definitely timing it. You see him moving at the exact same time as the center, but all right, sometimes those get called. That's fine. We talked about some of the positives, so I want to get back to that. We talked about Breece. We talked about Quincy. We talked about the improvements from Zach Wilson. One thing, and we talked about the Jets starting slow, and that's an issue. I think what kept them in the game, and I don't think, but one of the things that was so positive was they started three and out. I wanted them to get the ball first. We talked about this on Thursday's episode. I wanted to get the ball because I wanted to start quick. Of course, that doesn't work out. They start 3 and out. But then the special teams makes a play right away. The special teams forces a turnover on the punt, right? Thomas Morstead, who's been maybe the team MVP so far this year, had another incredible game. So you talk about him again. And then not only that, the Jets are forced to kick a field goal because they didn't do anything on offense. And then they come right back out and the defense gets a safety on the next possession. Like all of a sudden, this team is taking over. And that defensive line is incredible. So even with the slow start from the offense, the defensive line and the special teams was making things happen for this team early on.
Absolutely. And what a good call to bring up Irvin Charles.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the hungry guys, the guys that are on the practice squad, they make the best special team player. So that was a good call by Brent Boyer, who went to Robert Saleh and said, hey, I need this guy. Some teams, to everyone out there, let me tell you something. If you're not a starter, you are a special teamer. And 90% of the time of you making an NFL roster is the special team coordinator going to bat for you in those decision-making meetings when it's talking about a roster cut.
Do you
So
play on special teams?
I did play on special teams. My entire career, I played on special teams, man. So I understand the importance of being on all 3 phases and how important it is when you're looking at, because people don't worry about special teams, but it is a very important play. And one of the most selfless plays for a guy to think, hey, I could be a starting running back, but instead I'm on kickoff. It's a selfless play. Special teams plays or selfless plays. So you need a hungry guy that is willing to make a roster, a guy that is willing to somehow get active. And that was a good call, bringing a hungry practice player and saying, hey, this is your opportunity. And what an impact he made early on in that game, because who knows how that game would have went had Denver went down and scored that first possession, because our defense has been starting slow all year. But
exactly.
But bringing up Irvin Charles, it's a numbers game. You only allowed to dress 46 on game day.
Yep.
So then you see a McCall Hardman inactive on game day. And then you see a bad game by Xavier Gibson. So are we going to finally get an opportunity to see a McCall Hardman coming in? Because it's such a numbers game that you have to be very particular with who you want to dress on Sunday.
And that's the big thing, right? McCall sits, but then Gibson, finally, it's like, hey, this is you. And then he has a tough day. You could blame the sun, but hey, that's part of the elements. You're going to have to learn how to play in that. Do we see Hardman back next week for special teams? Then maybe it's Gibson who's sitting.
I think so. I think you see McCall Hardman, because as an organization, Xavier had one negative play after negative play after negative play. So as an organization, we're saying, hey, can we trust you if you make one mistake? Or are you going to be that guy that's going to be able to climb out of that mud pit? They don't want to see you continue to go down. You have to be that player at the professional level to say next play. And it just seems like he didn't let that play go, and we saw the results of balls, punts being put on the ground. It's very important in this league to catch punts. That's field position. Every yard counts, and I think you're going to probably see a McCall Hardman get an opportunity coming up.
Yeah, and you talked about it. Special teams is the type of position where if you're not hearing anything positive, it's negative, meaning unless you're returning a kick for a touchdown, the only time you get highlighted on special teams is if you make a mistake. That's why it is such a tough position to play in the league. And in this game, Xavier Gipson made a couple mistakes. And here's the thing, they're using him a lot. We talked about the pre-snap motion and all that stuff. They used it ultimately to get Garrett Wilson involved, where it's like, hey, we need to get Garrett Wilson. That was one of I think that was the first third down they converted, where they move Garrett Wilson in motion to get him the ball, to get an easy look to Garrett Wilson, that Zach can say, okay, now I have a one-on-one and I see exactly it's right in front of me. That was a great play call. They used Xavier Gipson a lot in that motion, but all those things are things we saw McCole Hardman do in Kansas City. So I could see him doing all those things that Gipson did. And if Gibson's not going to come through, like you said, you have limited roster spots. You see the Jets they're having to do this all over the place. It's not only happening on special teams. You talk about a guy who they signed in free agency who also was benched, or not benched, but was a healthy scratch on Sunday, Carl Lawson. But when you have guys like Bryce Huff and Al Woods playing the way they're playing, and Will McDonald playing the way he played, you can't dress everyone. And Carl Lawson was also just a casualty of that. So you talk about two guys that you signed in free agency in the last 2 years, McCole Hardman and Carl Lawson. When it comes down to it, sorry, Joe Douglas. Yeah, you put money, you invested money in these guys. I'm the head coach. I'm Robert Saleh. If they're not helping me win on Sunday, they can't play. It's winning time. We're done currying favor to guys who, okay, sure, maybe we signed them and so we have to justify the money. No, none of that matters anymore. Guess what? Michael Carter got more snaps in this game than Dalvin Cook did. We're starting to see an adjustment in the way this team looks at things. We're starting to see an adjustment in, hey, it's about winning. We're not worried about anything else. It's about winning right now.
But honestly, what I saw when I had an opportunity to go to training camp, I saw the interaction between the general manager Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. And those two guys, they
You're one of the
good
few because they hit it from us on Hard Knocks.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, I like their relationship. They're not butting heads. I'm sure Joe is saying, "Hey, Robert, this is your team. I'm just managing it." I totally support your judgment of who you need to be active, because they sit in these meetings on Thursday, on Friday, who's active, who's inactive, based on game plan, what personnel grouping we're gonna be leaning toward. If we need 3 tight ends, 1 tight end, 2 tight ends to beat another team. So the importance of going in with the right roster, having a certain amount of guys on this roster on game day, 46 to be exact, you have to have those conversations. And for someone, and especially the head man, to say, you know what, I know we paid Dalvin Cook a lot of money and we were trying to get him in early, but as of right now, Bryce Hall is more efficient. He's more productive right now. So let's take away his carries and give Bryce Hall more carries. Michael Carter, same thing.
Yep.
Michael Carter I think he brings a different dynamic and explosion to the game than Dalvin Cook right now. Dalvin Cook, to me, doesn't look comfortable in this offense, man. Is he a good running back? Absolutely. But he just doesn't look comfortable in his offense. It's like he's choppy steps. He's not running with confidence, and that elusiveness and that explosion that we see in the Bryce Hall. Even a Michael Carter catching the ball on the third down. He's the third down back. You see him catching the ball and just exploding. I don't see that change of speed with Dalvin Cook. So you have to make that decision as a staff, saying, I know we paid this guy a lot of money. Management, I know we paid him $7-8 million a year, but he's not really helping us win. What is going to help us win? Because they know now how good the New York Jets are, and they saying we can't waste 1 week of trying to please a guy or trying to squeeze a guy in based on contract or based on money. We need to win, and we need to win now.
Yeah, and we're 5 weeks in. Like, you had your opportunity, Dalvin Cook. It's only going to get harder for him because once the rookie comes back, Izzy Abanikanda, it's going to get tougher because who's going to be losing snaps? And maybe Izzy's going to play on special teams, or maybe Michael Carter's going to have to play on special teams, something like that. One of these guys is going to have to find a way to get on the roster if they want to. But we might see sooner rather than later, Dalvin Cook might end up being the healthy scratch, like a Carl Lawson, like a McCole Hardman. That could happen sooner rather than later. But you mentioned one thing. I kind of noticed this during the game. Zach Wilson talking to Dalvin Cook. There is a veteran presence to it. Like, there's something about that. You see CJ Uzomah talking to Zach a lot. CJ Uzomah isn't a huge effective player on the field oftentimes. He has a couple catches a game. He's good in the run blocking, but he's not a huge part of the game plan. But you see, he is one of the leaders on this team. There's something in having those guys, and you're seeing those guys finally start to rally around Zach. CJ Uzomah, I don't know if you saw this in the pregame. He gave this speech. Hey, we're winning this for Hackett. Let's go get this guy for Hackett. So there's clearly, seemingly, from the outside, I'm not there. There seems like this team is finally coming together, right? Like, there seems to be a chemistry growing with this team. The players trusting each other, playing for their coaches like they are playing for Hackett. Of course, he gets the game ball after the game. And that's so huge for this team at this point in the season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You love to see, as a fan base, as an organization, you love to see how these guys are continuing to glue together. There was a time in this season early on where, a couple things got out by players, and ever since then there's been nothing, with no unknown source saying different things. I'm sure the leadership came. I'm sure they had the players meeting. I'm sure there has been talks between players and coaches of leadership. And, the funnest time that I've had in that organization was when players and coaches were close. And there comes a time when players and coaches separate, they divide. And this is the most miserable feeling that you can have as a player or as a coach, when a player is just not agreeing with a coach, and a coach just not liking a player. I've been there, done it a couple times where I've seen it. All right. I've seen coaching staffs not like each other, honestly, not like each other. So to see players rally around a coach and say, hey, this is for Nathaniel Hackett, based on what Sean Payton said, that is what you want. That is a team that's going to fight. And the team that's going to fight together is a hard team to beat. So I see this New York team coming together, staying together, and making a big impact later on in this year.
And think about where we were just a couple of weeks ago, right? Literally 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the team bursting at the seams, the team fraying, them quitting on the coach losing the locker room, all these things. And then you hear a guy like Aaron Rodgers talk about, I would like it to get even tighter. I want it to get tight knit. I want the guys in there to just trust each other, not let any of this stuff get out in the media. And I sent you, I don't know if you saw it, but I sent you this video from Willie Colon talking with Ryan Russillo, saying when he was in New York, he never realized how much they talk about the media, how much Rex would talk about the media, because it was part of in New York, it's different. It's part of the game plan. You have to plan for, we can't have certain things get out. We have to be more tight knit. We have to be closer together. We have to seal our lips a little bit more, because they're out to get us a little bit out here. These beat reporters who are living with us in close quarters. I'm sure you could speak this every day. You were a guy who kept it quiet. You kept your mouth tight, tightly zipped in the media. But that's the type of thing that this team is finally doing, where it's like, hey, we're keeping it amongst ourselves. We have each other's back. Everything you'll see out on the field. But we're a close knit together, and that's something that we didn't see from this team.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, man, when you start hearing the unknown sources as a player, you're almost looking around the locker room like, who would say that? Like, let me guess.
Yep.
Let me look. Let me. And then you find yourself looking around, and who, like, personality wise, like you. And then you go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out who it was. Was it a coach? Was it a player? Like, who was it? Was it management? Was it somebody? And you don't want that, man. So you have to take your hat off to this team and the leadership that they have. It just shows you when those things were said between those those couple of players on social media. You have to take your hat off to the leadership in the locker room. I'm sure something was said. So you have the right pieces, right? And we know this league is hard to win, man. So if you have the right pieces, you have to win, man, and put it together. You got the right guys in the locker room. You got good football players. Let's go, man. Let's go.
Yeah, and it's something that we talked about. Maybe Aaron Rodgers did make a huge difference when he came in, because like we said 2 weeks ago, what possibly changed in the last 2 weeks that maybe it was Aaron Rodgers just showing up and having that veteran presence. I know he wasn't there this week, but he was there a couple weeks ago. He talked to the team. He was with the team, and maybe that can make a difference. And one of the things we talked about with Aaron Rodgers is the potential of him coming back. This Sunday was the perfect example of what would need to happen for Aaron Rodgers to come back. They won the game. Zach Wilson was fine. He was the game manager. They didn't win because of Zach Wilson. He would, if Zach Wilson plays a little better, it's probably a blowout. So I think this is exactly what we talked about. When we talk about what scenario would we see Rodgers potentially risk coming back this season for? This is the scenario where they win on the back of the defense, they win on the back of the special teams, and Zach Wilson plays good enough to win them the game alongside a great running game. And they stay relevant. The Bills lose. The Ravens lose. They stay relevant in the AFC. So if you're looking at big picture, this win is exactly what you want to see for this season. Now, small picture, we like to do this. This is the first time we're doing this, but player of the game is something we're going to be doing. Bilal is going to put out a poll every Monday or Sunday after a victory. Who is the player of the game? Somebody actually, Ryan just wrote in the replies, really need to pick two here because Breece and Quincy were both. But here are the options. You put it out on your social media. You can follow Bilal at Bilal Powell 29 on Twitter. And the options we had here were Bryce Hall, Zach Wilson, Quincy Williams, and Bryce Hall, who obviously comes in and makes the huge play at the end of the game. All extremely deserving. Who are you going with before I tell you where the fans went?
I am going to have to go with the guy that I gave my strong prediction to.
You did.
I said he was going to rush for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And this man almost had 200 yards all purpose. Breece, the Beast, Hall. I have to go with it, man.
And he almost broke a second one off. You were close. He almost broke another one he slams the ball down. He knew he was right there. He could have had that score. So yeah, you were close to that 2 touchdown prediction. I was rooting for it for sure. I'm going to go Quincy Williams because again, we love being right on this show. I'd rather, I would rather the Jets win than me be right sometimes, but when it works out, when they win and I'm right, it's great. I said he's been the best defensive player on the team this year. I stand by it. I said it a week ago on Monday. He makes the 2 biggest plays this game. Even before that, though, he's flying all over the field, making plays, like you said, sideline to sideline. This is a guy who is fantastic. He does it in the run game. He does it in the blitz, getting after the quarterback, and he does it in coverage. So I'm going Quincy Williams. The fans right now, you can still vote, but as of right now, the fans have Bryce Hall at 82% of the vote. Bryce Hall, then 15% Quincy Williams. The reason Bryce Hall is on here is pretty obvious. Also, Bryce Hall, you come in, your task is starting corner. You're filling the shoes of DJ Reed. That's a tough spot to be put in. He has a tough penalty called on him at some point, right on the 2-point conversion. And he comes back. He talked about coming back from mistakes. He doesn't put his head down. He just gets out there and he's like, all right, I got this. And he makes one of the biggest plays of the game.
And also, he was around the ball. He was around the football.
Yes.
Like he had his hands on 2 balls in that game. Like the one, obviously he was out of bounds and there was a penalty, but like he caught that ball. I'm like, okay, that guy's around the football. And then the scoop and score, which, Bryce, I know you're excited to, get your opportunity, but in that situation, just take a knee. Just go down. Just go down. No more risk. Take a knee. Situational football, understanding the game. Just take a knee so we can take a knee and get out of Denver. All right.
You saw him slow down at the end, almost like, oh, wait, shoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I suppose it was too late. Zach Wilson, the reason I think we put him on here also because, like you said, this was a guy that if you would have showed me this performance 2 weeks ago, he's unrecognizable. Because he had such a good game last week, I feel like people expected so much more of him this week. But when you think about what you expected, what you had wanted for Zach Wilson when Aaron Rodgers went down, this is all you could have hoped for. Manage the game. Don't make mistakes. Don't lose the game for us. Just manage the game. And that's what he did on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's going to wrap it up for us. Like we said, that's it. I mean, we're on to Philly. We'll talk about that on Thursday. But until then, I really appreciate this. It's been fun. And finally a victory Monday. One of the best. So I'll see you next week. All right. Or later this week.
I'll get out with you, man.
See ya.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.